What does your experience in counter narcotics, investigating the Mexican drug cartel, teach you about human nature?
Wow. I mean, first off, anybody can be got. Anybody can be corrupted. You work in that field, and you realistically, the training we got and profiling and investigation and stuff like that was basically you learn from the older guys there, and some of those guys were already corrupted from the start. So trust no one. I remember seeing that X-Files episode where that was stated. You quickly learn that even if you are somebody that to your own mind appears incorruptible, small changes happen around you, wheels get greased, money gets put in front of you, and or things get threatened, like your life. And sometimes the payment for some of this corruption is just to continue on living. You encounter people that seem incorruptible, that go through FBI background checks, that go through all of the security measures that all of us were put through, polygraph test. And then later on, it turns out they were on the take, or they became somebody that was corrupted. I think what I found out is that anybody at any level, they could be a very strong, hard to get person right now, but people get corrupted through their families, through need. Mexico is a place where a lot of instability occurs. So financial needs, health.
So a crack could form through the wall of integrity, and then over time it seeps in somehow.
Mexico has a culture of corruption. Like, you have your kid that goes to school at public school, and you want him to be in the morning, not in the afternoon school time period. So you go off and grease the wheels with the director of the school. People hearing this in Mexico will nod their heads, because this is something that happens from early on. So there's a systemic and cultural thing to it, as far as getting around rules. And this happens because, the people that are in charge in Mexico, the government, is, their tandem amount is trust between criminals and the cartels down there for a lot of the culture. So people don't trust the government, and much less criminality. So
when you meet a person sticking on human nature, do you think it's possible to figure out if they can be trusted? So you said anyone could be corrupted. How long would you need to talk to a person? And even in your own personal, private life, just a friend? Or is trust a thing that's never really guaranteed?
I think trust is never really guaranteed. I know a lot of people are going to say that's a sad way and hard way of living your life, but, life experience at my end, people change. The dynamics of a relationship might change. I look at people's character, specifically their past and past experiences, if I can. Somebody that presents himself in front of you as somebody, but you quickly learn that somebody is just a mask or a persona that they kind of created for themselves.
And they might not even be aware of the persona? Like, is there some deep psychological stuff?
Sometimes. I've experienced a lot of failure in my life. You can see it in my nose, you can see it in my lack of a digit, the amount of the amount of failures you can see in somebody and how they wear them sometimes is a pretty telling thing, as far as them being able to be trusted, or that you can trust their story or their experience. And when I say experience, I mean, I've met some criminals, like former criminals, or, some people of that background that I trust with my life, because they're not reformed. But they figured out that that's not a life they could live long enough to kind of continue on in. And I've also met people that are in law enforcement that I wouldn't trust with my car keys, because whatever persona they adopted over the years is a pretty good one, pretty good mask. Sometimes such a good mask they don't even know they're wearing it.
And on top of that, it's not just the psychology. There's also a neurobiology to it. I've been very fortunate and deliberate to surround myself with good people throughout my life. But I've recently gotten to sort of observe, not close to me, but nearby, somebody that could be classified as a sociopath.
Yeah.
And a narcissist.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to use those psychological terms, but just, it's like, people, come with different biology too. So it's not just like the trauma you might experience in your early life and all the deep complexity that leads to the psychology that you have as an adult, but it's also the biology you come with, the nature, that you might not just have the the machine that can empathize deeply with the experience of others, or maybe a machine that gets a dopamine rush from the manipulation of other humans,
Yeah.
or the control of other humans.
Yeah, I mean, put an example of my own background. My mom didn't have a father. You know, he left really early on in their childhood. You know, my mom raised her two sisters and basically kept a household. She was a great mom. She was a badass. You know, she was very independent. She showed me how to be independent. She showed me how to kind of watch out for others and kind of build me up in that way. And I had a great childhood as far as her and kind of like how she molded me. Later on, I figured out that when I had my own kid, you know, I figured out that she was basically trying to make me into what she didn't have in a way. And if I can get to see somebody's parents, you know, that's usually a sign of something, at least for me, as far as figuring out where people are. I think there's something to be said about nature and nurture and how some people come up. Some people are just born with that predatory instinct, you know, and you'll never know. I mean, they spend their whole life practicing how to hide it. But if you can figure out somebody's, you know, background, childhood, where they're from, you can kind of tell something about them. You know, I'm from Tijuana, you know. I'm a survivor. That's my background as far as where I'm from.
Culturally, genetically, psychologically, the full shebang.
Yeah, I guess some people are born with certain predispositions, and if they're in the right environment, some of the negative aspects might flourish more than others. You know, for me, I mean, I grew up skateboarding in Tijuana, and I remember breaking into my first backyard pool. It was a house that a cartel guy owned, and we used to skate the pool in the back of it. So I learned how to pop open padlocks with a small vehicle hydraulic lift, and I remember doing that. And later on in life, I got to train with people from other parts of Mexico and work with them. And I remember pulling that trick off, and they were like looking at me like, "Where'd you learn that?" It's like some burglars in Tijuana. You know, and they're like, "Wow, that's interesting. Like, are all people from Tijuana like that?" And I said, "No, we're not all like that, but I guess in some way we are, because, you know, Tijuana produces kids like that. You know, she produces, like, the environment itself produces a pretty specific person, I guess. You know, where our normal or our baseline normal is way different than most."
The trajectories that you can take in life are defined in a way that aren't available elsewhere in the world.
Yeah.
And so you develop, I mean, that's part of that psychological, part of that is cultural and so on. Part of that is the cultural trauma, but then also the ethical lines based on the corruption. Because I grew up in the Soviet Union, and there's the same kind of understanding that there's some gray area of corruption.
Yeah. It's always there, like on the outskirts or even in the center. How you can grease things to make things easier, and how it's like it's personal thing. I'll just, you know, pay off in Tijuana we have a mordida is what we call it. You know, when you pay a cop off, una mordida means a bite. So, and
What's the bite aspect?
so you get stopped for a traffic violation of some sort, and the cop walks up to you. Obviously, you don't say the word bite, but it's like a slang term for it. And he asks for your paperwork, and, you know, and if you get fined or get a ticket, you say, "Can I pay the ticket here?" Is what they say. Yeah. And, you know, put your money inside the paperwork and hand it over to the cop. Mordida. You think it's, you know, I'm just going to do it and nobody knows, you know, but it's a systemic thing. Everybody, like a lot of people do it, and then they don't trust the police because they are fed with this.
Yeah, I mean, same thing was in the Soviet Union. It's funny. But then there's something inside you where that kind of, those opportunities come, like with a police officer, where you realize you could just pay a little bit of money and get out of a thing. And then you realize you can pay a little bit of money or do a favor to get your kids in a better school or something like that.
Yeah.
But there comes opportunities where, all right, if I do this little thing, I can get a huge promotion, or I can get a huge increase in my power, or I can get a lot of money. And something inside you says, no, it's not right.
Yeah.
And I wonder what that is. That, because like, Yeah, I want because it feels different than the legal systems within which you operate. There's some kind of basic human integrity, human decency. I wonder if that's like constructed or it's always there. If it's like again, nature versus nurture.
Yeah, I think for me, it was looking at seeing that in somebody else that I kind of learned about it. There's a man that I consider a mentor figure. His name's Lieutenant Colonel Lizaola. He was a lieutenant colonel from the Army that basically came over and took over the group that I used to work with. He was, incorruptible. He was that was the essence or the aura that he projected. The first time he went off on patrol when he was placed in charge of us, I actually drove him around Tijuana. He was one of those lead from the front type of people. The amount of assassination attempts he got was basically a proof of how uncorruptible he was, because they kept trying to pay him off, and when that didn't work, they tried to kill him several times. I think the last assassination attempt took the use of his legs, and that man is still a dangerous person in my mind. But for me, and people can gather a little bit about my background and where I'm from and some of the access I currently have to train the federal institutions here in the U.S. as far as my background and if I was corrupted or not, because there's a lot of that out there. The Catholic guilt that's kind of built into some of us is always kind of there, El cucuy vive bajo la cama. The devil was under the bed, So I don't consider myself Catholic. Consider myself culturally Catholic, I think, is what I kind of say with that. I had a pretty good structure with my dad and my mom at the house, and they never let me get away with things. And I think my mom was a pretty big moral compass for me. But that lieutenant colonel kind of leading from example and seeing his work and how much profound change he caused in the people that work with him, as far as, we felt supported and we felt like we had a guiding figure during this. Tijuana was the most dangerous city on the planet when I was working there, and he took charge.
What does it take to be a man, the lieutenant colonel, who maintains integrity after assassination attempts? Is it possible for a normal human to do that? Or again, is it genetic?
That's an interesting question. I'll say this. Seeing him, the last assassination attempt he had that took the use of his legs, he was with his kid. There was a recklessness to it, I can see that now, now that I have enough distance from it. I could see that there's a recklessness to being that way. And also you put in jeopardy people around you if you take that route. So I think there's a sacrifice to it, a very powerful and hard one to make for a lot of people. For me, it was, I wouldn't get picked to get on board with some of the operations groups that I wanted to work with, because I was known for not, taking money or not being trusted by certain older segments of the organization that I was with stuff, because they knew that I wouldn't, I wasn't on the, I wouldn't get money. So there's always a weird sacrifice to it, and you're almost kind of like masochistic in that way when you get approached with it. They're like, "Why are you being an idiot? Why are you driving around that beat up car? Look at the Hummer H2 that just drove in with the other guy that is doing exactly your same job." Society as a whole down there doesn't reward it, or at least doesn't see it in the people that don't take that route in Mexico. For them, is all cops are corrupt, all of them. And, seeing it, again, from the outside, I'm not there anymore. There is, there's almost like a, why didn't you, Ed? It could have been easier maybe, or you could have been dead long ago, because people that are on the takedown there are usually owned by one side or the other. And when that gets found out, if you have somebody that you're paying off that hints you off of drug operations in the area, your rivals are pretty keen on killing you.